Now, one of the reasons why I'm a massive advocate of a spring clean is something I'll do every 1 to 2 years. And I'll do a spring clean because I can't believe how much crap I get out of the back of my reef. And the reef just seems to run better after I've done a spring clean. Because if you go for years and all the crap builds up through the back of the reef and you don't do anything about it, it ends up becoming anoxic, and then you start to form what's called hydrogen sulfide underneath, which grows in anoxic zones. So this hydrogen sulfide can slowly leach out into the aquarium and is the main reason for what they call old tank syndrome, which is many years down the track. But it is really important if you are going to do a spring clean to put some polyfilter in, because you don't want to be killing your fish due to hydrogen sulfide when you release all that out. So I do love spring cleans, even though it's a massive disruption, and there's always risk with disruption. But the amount of crap I get out always shocks me. But also that you set the reef up, you make it look really good. Like this aquascape here is actually really nice. But no matter how nice your aquascape is, after a while you get over it. So my opinion, right, is you set your tank up, you make it look amazing. Everyone loves it. For 1 year you love it, the next year you like it, and then you've seen it. And the best thing you can do is just completely change it. Instead of having 2 reefs, have a big reef, whatever you do to make it completely different. And remember, to your fish, that little box is their whole life. And if you change that around, you get to change. They've got all these new things to check out, and the fish just seem very interested and excited by it. And the change is what keeps you interested. Otherwise, you get completely stale, and no matter how beautiful your aquarium is, you find that you almost can't be bothered looking at it. So just don't ask me for marriage advice. So this tank now has a quarantine tank for it. These leadies, particularly the 75s, are ideal. So they're a 100 litre tank. They come with a heater, a light, a filter. So when you set the filter up, just make sure there's plenty of good surface agitation for the filter. You'll set the salinity up at a slightly lower salinity. Then you try and run the temperature the same as your main tank. Then any new fish you get go into this tank in a low salinity. Also, it's good to have some cured filter media. So whether you take a bit of marine pure out of here, you can just grab some balls out of there. If you've had disease in your tank, maybe that's not a good idea. But if your tank is running very well, you can get some marine pure, throw it in the bottom, fill the tank up with water from the aquarium, drop the salinity using some RO, put the fish in there, make sure they're happy in there for a month, then make sure that the salinity, temperature and pH is exactly the same in that tank as the main tank. Then you can just catch the fish out and throw them straight into the main tank. And pre-quarantining your fish is absolutely and totally the best thing that you can ever do. It stops a lot of heartache. So with an aquarium, if you're getting coralline algae, that's when you're winning. Now this is a relatively new aquarium, so getting coralline algae in a new tank is not totally expected. But as you get sort of 4-6 months down the track, you can start getting coralline algae. Now these rocks here have all got fake coralline algae on it because they're fake rocks. And but you'll get coralline algae that's basically the color of these rocks. And it's good to have a back wall that you don't clean. So in this case, with this current aquascape, they're going to not clean that weir. And then eventually that will actually go the same color as the rocks when you get coralline. If you're not getting coralline, that's a bad sign. That means there's usually something wrong. If you are getting coralline, then that's a good sign. If you're not getting coralline too, it's good to put a few bits of live rock in to try and get some spores of coralline. And with this sort of setup, where it's off the back wall, it actually looks really nice. But over time, you will need to keep the back wall clean, which is another pain in the ass thing you've got to do. Otherwise, in the future, as you go to redecorate it, you can use the back wall too. Then you don't have to worry about cleaning it. So in general, I won't bother cleaning what I don't look through. But for a setup like this, I think what's going on here is quite good. He's not going to clean the weir, and he's going to leave them clean and clear while you have a setup like this. But once again, if we don't have coralline algae, then we're not winning. And the important thing is to win. And we need to understand that the corals grow, and if they're not growing, they're dying. So it's really good to go and take some photos of your tank, put them on Facebook, because Facebook will give you updates to show you what you were doing a year ago and stuff like that. And it's really cool when it shows you your fish tank. Or you can look back, and then everything's time-stamped. So you can go, oh, that's what that coral looked like 4 months ago or whatever. And it's really nice to see the progress of your tank and have a date for when that photo was taken. So that's why I'm a big fan of documenting your tank on Facebook, because that's a way of being able to look back on the growth of your corals. And once again, if your corals are not growing, then they're dying. So some people will come in, for example, and they'll say to me, oh, my Gonioporas live for a year. And I go, no, they don't. Your Goniopora take a year to die. Because if they're not growing, they're dying. And basically your corals are only going to die for 2 reasons. They're going to die because they've got too much of something or not enough of something. So that particular coral, is it getting enough light or is it getting too much light? Is it getting enough water flow or is it getting too much water flow? Is it getting enough nutrients or is it not getting enough nutrients? Has it got enough macro and micro and trace elements? Has it got too much or has it got not enough? It's basically, or besides fish picking on it and stinging each other, therefore does it have enough room? Does it not have enough room? Everything's about balance in a reef tank. If you create a situation where your corals have balance and you've addressed water flow, you've addressed light, you've addressed nutrients, you've addressed macro and micro and trace elements, then your aquarium will absolutely thrive. If you get too much of something or not enough of something, that's when you're going to have a problem. Now, when you pick the test kits that work for you, the ones that you're actually going to use, and I highly recommend a logbook or getting one of those apps so you can keep track of when and what you are doing, then once again, your corals are going to grow. And if they're not growing, they're dying. So therefore, you need to know where your parameters need to be. And then you basically need to keep the corals within those parameters. And once again, you'll understand that there are various corals that cannot handle much variation in the parameters at all. Then there's other corals that can actually handle very large differences in the parameters. So that's what comes down to. If you keep your tank super well and you keep all your levels where they should be, then there's no reason why you can't keep all coral. If you're a little bit fluctuant in your approach and you're not keeping all the levels exactly where they should be, that's when keeping easy corals really comes as the major benefit. Now, the other thing is that there's a big factor of what you don't know that you don't know. So, for example, you can test up all this water and the major things will basically get shown up through these tests. So the combination of these and them is basically everything you need. But if you get everything right, then most of your corals are going to be totally fine and they're going to grow and they're going to thrive. And once again, the aim is for the corals to thrive. Now, if all these levels are okay, but there's still species of coral that are not thriving the way you want them to, that's when you send away an ICP test. So you send off a test to Triton, and then they will give you a whole bunch of results, and then you may find that molybdenum's too high or some other level that you don't even know is too high. So what that really does is give you a bit of an insight into the things that you don't know that you don't know. Because once again, you need to understand that your corals grow and your corals don't want to die. Your corals want stability. And if you are able to create stability because your dosing regime works and your water change regime works, then your animals should grow. And if that's not the case, then you can send away a Triton test, you can find out what's wrong, then you can start changing the combination of trace elements and additions and water changes and so forth in order to improve that situation. then once you've found whatever it was that was too much or not enough, then that coral should really thrive. Now, cleanup crew is a very big part of this tank. So we want to get sand sifting stars and Stromschnales and stuff like that to do the sand. Then we want to get blennies, tangs, trocus snails, abalones and stuff like that to do the rocks and glass. And we want to make sure there's plenty of cleanup crew in the aquarium. And different cleanup crew go for different stuff. So that's why it's good to have a good range. And then if you find that you've got sand sifting stars, for example, and they're dying, well, don't go buying more because maybe there's not enough of the particular food that they want. And then you want to just sort of fine-tune your cleanup crew to make sure that you're minimizing your algae and minimizing your debris and making sure your sand is as clean as possible. And the more you learn about cleanup crew, the more you learn that they really are a big part of a reef aquarium. So water quality being the big one, and then the other thing is nutrients. So the food that you feed your coral and your fish is super, super important. So fish food is most of feeding, and the two foods that I'm extremely biased towards is Spectrum's probiotics. And the reason why I like Spectrum's probiotics is I find it's a super clean food, and the good bacteria that comes in the food means that when the fish poo, the bacteria in the poo eats the poo, which is a massive thing. It also has anti-phosphate and anti-nitrate enzymes or ability to reduce them there. And I find that really works. And I also like to feed a little bit of Dainichi. A lot of people like frozen food, and as a treat, I'm all for it, but I don't like relying on frozen food as my main food. I will like probiotics from New Life Spectrum, and I will like Dainichi. That's how I get the best results. But there's all other good foods on the market. But being aware that quality is everything. And if you've got super happy fish with super good color, with super good immune systems, then that's all good. But I find that most food that's available on the market is just processed crap.